Let the word go forth.
Fool me once.
Are you fired up?
I'm not a crook.
Are you ready to go?
Shame on you.
It's Abe Lincoln's Top Hat, hosted by Ben Kissel.
Yeah. Fool me, can't get fooled again.
That's good. How are you feeling, Marcus?
I feel okay.
You feel okay?
Yeah, I feel all right. Feeling a little fuzzy today, but that's fine.
Why are you feeling fuzzy?
I don't know, man. I'm just a fuzzy boy.
He's a fuzzy boy. That's disgusting. Remember those little fuzzy things with the feet that you had to peel off the sticker, and then they would sit on your desk? The little feet with the fuzzies.
I have no idea what you're talking
Fuzzy
about.
feet. You don't remember fuzzy feet?
No.
Oh, if you did well on an exam, you got one. I never got any. That's all right. You know the fuzzy feet. All right, everyone, welcome to the show. I am Ben Kissel. That's Marcus Parks.
I'm typing in fuzzy feet and finding nothing.
What do you mean? You know they were purple or red. They were just little fuzzballs with the feet, and then you peeled off the sticker and they would sit on your desk. The fuzzy feet. I don't want to get into it. It doesn't matter.
All right,
we got a lot to get into.
We do have a lot to get into. It's been a hell of a week, as always.
As always, Donald Trump is on his first foreign trip. He chose to go to the Middle East to start things off because it's easy. That is simple. If he thought being president was difficult, negotiating with Congress, wait until he meets with Middle Eastern leaders and realizes how difficult it is for them to negotiate on a global level as opposed to a national level.
No, it's great. He went to Saudi Arabia first,
right.
One of the only places where protesting is illegal, and one of his aides said, you know what, it's great that there's no protesters out here.
Absolutely.
And that's because it's punishable by death there.
That's absolutely correct. And of course, they do religious checkpoints in Saudi Arabia. You have to be Muslim in order to pass through. Christians not allowed in many places. And their treatment of women is less than exemplary, to say the least, despite what Ivanka Trump said on her trip. That was Saturday, May 20th. He was in Saudi Arabia. So what happened during his visit to the birthplace of Islam? President Trump pivoted from his previous assessment of Islam as a religion of hatred and sought to rally the Muslim world to join the United States in fighting extremism. There he met with King Salman of Saudi Arabia, and Mr. Trump and the First Lady joined the Saudi royal family for dinner. Of course, one of the interesting things about all of this is, recall the 2016 campaign. Hillary Clinton was blasted for her relationship with the Saudi family, taking a lot of money for the Clinton Foundation from the Saudi royal family. And of course, 17 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia. So a point that Donald Trump made time and time again regarding his disdain for the Saudi government and for the Saudi royal family. Times have changed. Apparently, Donald Trump has wilted under the pressure, and not only wilted under the pressure, literally curtsied under the pressure. And I'm not going to get into the optics. People demonized Barack Obama for meeting with the I believe it was a traditional Japanese bow that he gave, and people were like, look at this sellout to the American people. It's a very difficult position for a person to be in, and, so he did look a little goofy, but I'm not going to say that was the worst thing that Donald Trump has ever done.
No, it's like, what is he going to say? Like, yeah, I don't do that.
I don't exactly. You have to do it.
Yeah, you got to do it. I mean, that's just part of foreign diplomacy.
At this point, he hasn't choked on a pretzel like W. Bush, or like H.W. Bush vomited all over a foreign leader because he had food poisoning on account of bad sushi. So he hasn't done that quite yet.
Not quite yet.
On Sunday, May 21st, he stayed in Saudi Arabia. He met with leaders of the Gulf Coalition, including Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. He attended a lot of meetings with leaders from across the Muslim world. He gave a speech about Islam, toured a new center to fight radicalism, and was scheduled to participate in a conference about social media, but Ivanka Trump spoke instead, and that's where she made her less than accurate statements regarding women and their treatment when it comes to Saudi Arabia and the royal family.
Yeah, and that's isn't that when Trump dropped out on day 2 of his trip?
He was exhausted.
Oh my God, he's so exhausted.
He was tired. And with a big old bumble butt like that, it gets hard to carry it around. I honestly believe this is not... he hasn't done as poorly as some people would have expected, or some, sad enough to say, would have liked to see him do up to this point. He's currently in Vatican City, and there is no love lost between he and Pope Francis. But quite frankly, it's kind of nice to see Pope Francis upset. I don't mind.
He is so upset. He's so upset that the picture of Donald Trump, they're all wearing black.
Yes.
Donald Trump smiling, Melania looking miserable, Ivanka looking like her soul has left her body,
Yes.
and the Pope looking very unhappy to be standing next to all of them.
And of course, one of the criticisms, again, in the 2016 campaign that Donald Trump constantly spewed from his mouth was that Hillary Clinton did not have the stamina to be president of the United States. And of course, sure enough, it is proving to be rhetoric as opposed to reality, because it turns out he might not be the one who can handle the pressure of a full-on Middle Eastern trip, specifically his first trip. And also his staffers, according to a White House insider, they are keeping him extremely busy so he can't tweet. And that's true. Apparently, that's what a White House staffer said. So we are living in the world of Veep. Basically, it is a satire, but unfortunately, it is manifested itself right here in the world.
They have to keep his little hands occupied?
They have to.
So he doesn't tweet? So he doesn't make a fucking fool of himself and the country?
Keep him busy. Exactly what my parents did to me, and exactly whatever good teacher I had. They forced me to stay busy so that I wouldn't draw on my desk, because unfortunately we didn't have Twitter back then, or thankfully we didn't have Twitter back then, because I have no idea the Rage Against the Machine lyrics that I would be tweeting out on a regular basis. 14, 15-year-old Ben Kissel.
God, it's like giving a little kid a magazine on a long road trip so he doesn't kick your seat.
Yep, that's basically it. Take his shoes. He won't kick the seat if he has no shoes. His toes will break. May 22nd, this past Monday, he was in Israel and the West Bank. On his first day of a 2-day trip, Mr. Trump told Israeli officials he was deeply encouraged by his conversations in Saudi Arabia regarding peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
Isn't that when he said he just got back from the Middle East?
I think so. It's difficult.
Showed up in Israel's like, I just got back from the Middle East.
Whew, it's nice to be here. Where are we? Well, I guess we didn't quite get out. We took a plane ride. Usually I go to a different place. So he greeted Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli officials upon his arrival in Tel Aviv before flying via helicopter to Jerusalem, which now he has backtracked on a campaign promise to move the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. That is no longer on the forefront of his foreign policy agenda. And that angered quite a few of the people who voted for him from the religious right. Because for those that don't know, just a very brief history on all of that, the religious right, the evangelical Christians, do believe that there will be the second coming of Jesus Christ only when Jerusalem is the capital of Israel and basically the Palestinians have been wiped off the face of the earth. And then the evangelical Christians will go and theoretically wipe the Jewish individuals off the face of the planet, and then Jesus comes back, and you know what? It makes no rational sense.
No.
But nonetheless, he has backtracked on making Jerusalem the capital.
Was that also the same day that he all but confirmed that Israel was the source of the intelligence that he shared with the Russians?
Well, he said that he didn't mention the name Israel when discussing the intelligence that he's received to the Russians.
I didn't mention the. I just said I didn't mention the word Israel.
Yes,
I didn't mention the word is Jesus.
He didn't mention it.
Did you see Benjamin Netanyahu shuffling, just the look of horror on his face? Just get out of here. Get out of here.
And I gotta say, I don't like when people in this country demonize Donald Trump when it comes to his relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. For those that don't recall, Netanyahu's campaign when he beat this guy Herzog, he ran one of the most Islamophobic campaigns in the history of the world, and he went so far right. Benjamin Netanyahu is no saint. He's got blood on his hands, and he's done some really atrocious things to the Palestinian people. Of course, again, keep it fair, the Palestinian people and many people in the Middle East want to eradicate Israel as a state. So I understand, again, that's why the tensions are so unbelievably high, because it's not just we don't like one another. They want to eradicate one another. So it's very serious, and that's why Donald Trump proclaiming that he would somehow be able to reach a peace deal with his first trip is fairly asinine, on par with Jimmy Carter. Okay, so he also met with President Reuven Rivlin of Israel at his residence, visited the Church of the Holy, I think it's Sepulchre, and became the first sitting president of the United States to visit the Western Wall. And you wonder if he got some good ideas. The president and the first lady are also at dinner with Mr. Netanyahu and his wife, Sarah. He's like, how'd you get the Mexicans to pay for this? Benjamin, BB, tell me, how'd you get the Mexicans to pay for this? What are you talking about, Donald? Tuesday, May 23rd, he was in Israel and the West Bank as well. He was expected to meet with Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas, thank you, Marcus. The Palestinian leader, Mr. Trump has said he wants to broker a bigger and better deal. It's
going to be beautiful.
It's a bigger and better deal. Okay, between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
That's what we've been missing from this whole Israeli-Palestinian negotiation process is a bigger and better deal.
But what does that mean?
I don't know.
Right now, the font of your deal is a 12, and we were going to make this a 16 font. That makes it bigger, and then we'll make it better by larger paper.
Yeah, that's what we've been missing in the negotiation process is used car salesman lingo.
Hey, that's good. I love a good used car. He did meet with Mr. Abbas. He laid a wreath at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, and he gave a speech at the Israel Museum before departing to Rome, which is where he is at today. He is meeting with Pope Francis, and of course, the future is just... It is what it is. It is dumb. They had a Twitter feud.
Yes.
If those that don't recall, and again in the 2016 campaign, Donald Trump got into a fight with the Pope via Twitter, and this is the first time they're meeting. And judging from the pictures, the Pope takes his Twitter feuds seriously.
The Pope did not forget the President of the United States calling him disgraceful on a platform that is disgraceful.
But I kind of do enjoy the United States president pissing off the Pope.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of enjoy that too. I mean, we all the 14-year-old in us loves that.
Right.
But it just isn't necessarily the best thing for the leader of the free world to be engaged in.
Yes, so now he's meeting with the Pope at the Vatican, and he's touring St. Peter's Basilica. He is going to head all around there, and then he arrives in Brussels later on this week, where he is supposed to meet with European officials and lunch with President Emmanuel Macron of France, of course, the newly elected president who Donald Trump actively supported his opponent, Le Pen. And interestingly enough, Barack Obama actively supported Emmanuel Macron. Macron. I don't know how to say it. And a lot of people, especially on the right, the ones who are defending Donald Trump regarding this whole Russian probe that's happening, which again is a moot point if it does turn out that he attempted to halt the process of the investigation when asking James Comey to cut it out, when it comes to Michael Flynn, because that's obstruction of justice. So it doesn't even matter anymore if there is a Russian tie with the Trump campaign in 2016, because now we're on to a whole nother Nixonian-like level, although as I've said on national television multiple times, even the Saturday Night Massacre, where Nixon fired a huge majority of individuals who were investigating him, he didn't fire the head of the FBI.
No.
So in some ways, it's a disservice to Richard Nixon to equate Donald Trump to him. But anyway, so that's a whole
sullying Nixon's good name.
I guess so, in a strange way. But a lot of people on the right, when hearing about Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, have demonized Barack Obama for being so active in the French election, and they don't quite see the difference. And in some ways, I can understand where they're coming from. Was this the United States? Of course, Barack Obama was not a sitting U.S. president. He was just a civilian, and at the end of the day, he's allowed to have any political views that he wants to have. But of course, he's a former president of the United States, and so people say, is that not fiddling with a foreign election? Barack Obama actively campaigning against Le Pen and for Macron.
Well, didn't Nigel Farage from the UK come over to the United States and actively campaign for Donald Trump?
Boris Johnson the exact same way, and of course Donald Trump, while in office, did support Le Pen. So
that argument falls apart immediately.
Well, but of course with the Russian collusion, the only thing that really sticks in my mind is Michael Flynn, if they actually turned him and made him a double agent, or if he had more loyalty to the Russian government than the United States government. And we don't have to rehash all of that with the December 21st sanctions put on the Russians December 21st from Barack Obama. Michael Flynn telling the Russians that don't worry about it. As soon as Donald Trump is in office, those sanctions will be wiped away. Barack Obama, still a sitting U.S. president at the time. That's where we really start to see some of the meat in the scandal when it comes to the Russian collusion. But yes, to your point, you can actively campaign for individuals that you want to see elected all around the world.
Yeah, what was that? Did you watch any of Brennan's testimony yesterday?
Yes, of course. John Brennan, he was the former head of the CIA. He basically just came out and said that he believes there was collusion with the Russian government regarding Michael Flynn in the 2016 campaign. And of course, we're not going to get the answer from Michael Flynn himself because he has pled the fifth. Which we have, if we want to live in the perfect world that we pretend to live in, although we don't pretend to live in it. But if we want to live in a perfect world, we say, oh, he's just exercising his constitutional right. But let's be honest, the majority of people will believe that means he's guilty.
Well, in the words of the president and various other people, in the words of the president and himself.
Yes.
And himself.
Michael Flynn himself.
But,
yes.
pleading the fifth, like it really makes you look guilty. And Brennan said something really interesting in the hearing when he was saying that the Russians are very good about turning someone into an agent without that person even knowing it.
Sort of a frog in slowly boiling water, right?
Yes.
And then at some point you realize that you're in so deep and the barbs are in so far that if you do want to get out, you're going to lose your whole throat anyway. Yeah. And you might as well just stay on the hook.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and it I think it does speak towards these people. That I think if it does end up being that there was some sort of collusion, I don't think that there is like an intent to betray America. I think these people just got in way too deep. That does not make it right, and they should still be punished for that if that is the case. But I really don't. I don't think that we're dealing with an evil empire here. I don't think we're dealing with movie villains.
No, I don't think that Michael Flynn thought that Donald Trump was going to win. And you are allowed to register as a foreign agent. There is nothing. Yeah. I mean, it's not illegal.
You're not supposed to lie about it, though.
You're not supposed to lie about it. Yeah. And you're not supposed to lie to the vice president about it. If he lied to the vice president about it at all, I have a theory that I believe Mike Pence is one of the individuals doing an immense amount of the leaking because, as you always say, cui bono.
Cui bono.
And I do believe he wants to be the president of the United States, as every politician in their right mind would want to be, specifically if they want to get into national politics the way that they obviously do.
Well, it's fair. It's also possible that Pence could be wrapped up in all this as well.
Who knows?
It's possible that a lot of these guys could be wrapped up in it. It's possible that a lot of people in the Republican Party have been wrapped up. I mean, that's what we've been saying for months now about this Russia stuff. We're seeing a lot of smoke, not necessarily any fire, but the fire is starting to show itself, or at the very least, like you said, the fire is shifting because now the question is obstruction. Even if Donald Trump was trying to quash all this just so he wouldn't have to deal with it anymore, so he could get it out of the headlines, that's still obstruction of an investigation.
Absolutely. And of course, you look at Representative Jason Chaffetz, who is deciding to resign his extremely senior position in the Republican Party to go spend more time with his family. All of a sudden, he loves them. And I'm sure he's always loved them. I'm not going to demonize the man's personal relationship, but it does seem a little bit strange.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things happening, and we will find out a heck of a lot more as soon as James Comey sits down and testifies in front of the Senate. That will be fascinating, and he'll be under oath. And, of course, he did come out May 3rd and say that Donald Trump had not pressured him when it comes to the investigation. A lot of time has passed since then, and it is possible that he was just trying to protect the agency, protect the investigation, and protect the underlings around him and under him. So we'll have a lot. We don't know the answer to that quite yet, but we're going to know again as soon as he testifies, and that could be the beginning. And as we've said before, it is not the fire that kills the majority of people in a fire. It is the smoke.
Yep.
You die of smoke inhalation, and you literally choke before you could even become burned alive. And you wonder if this is just enough smoke that would constantly lead to such a constant slow suffocation of the Trump administration that he can no longer be effective and would be forced to resign even if not impeached.
Did you hear who they're probably going to replace Chavez with?
Who?
Gowdy.
Oh, Trey Gowdy. That's great.
That weird-headed asshole.
Yep, former prosecutor. I believe he's out of Texas. That might not be correct. I think that he is. I've never liked him. He's one of these guys who's trying to make a name for himself in every single Senate hearing, and he wants to get his political agenda across far more, which is far more important to him than getting the truth out of the people that he's talking with.
And he's not even taking all this shit seriously. During the Brennan hearings, it was his turn to speak, and he was talking to somebody else, and they said, "Excuse me, Mr. Gowdy, it's your turn." And he says, "Oh, excuse me, I was colluding with one of my colleagues.
Well,
it's like, you fucking dickhead, take this seriously.
He has been,
please.
He has been one of the names implicated in possibly the Russian collusion scandal, and there's, like you just said, there's a lot of people that could be involved in this web, and we're going to get to the bottom of it at some point as soon as we get these individuals who know more things than we know testified. So on Friday, Donald Trump will be in Sicily, Saturday Sicily, and then he is back here in the United States of America. Which brings us to the budget. Donald Trump's budget. A lot of people on both the right and the left are quite confused. Marcus has a couple of different stats, but first I just want to read this little article from the New York Times. It's written by Patricia Cohen and Nelson Schwartz. I'll just read the first 4 paragraphs or so. Let's see. It says, if one assumption has undergirded Republican economic policies for decades and is the foundation of the Trump administration's first budget proposal, it is that tax cuts will unleash fantastic growth. The basic idea is that shrinking the government's share increases what people take home, encouraging workers to work more and investors to invest more. But while taxes can create incentives that can promote growth, liberal and conservative economists alike said that there was no evidence that the White House budget announced on Tuesday would do so. The assumed effects on growth are just huge and unwarranted. This is said by William G. Gale, a co-director of the nonpartisan Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center and a former economic advisor to the first president, George Bush. So certainly no left-leaning liberal here. This is a conservative saying the assumed effects on growth are just huge and unwarranted. The Trump administration promises to cut taxes, keep revenue steady, and crank out an average annual economic growth of 3%, but neither the budget nor the tax reforms previously outlined in sketchy form provide enough detail to figure out if that will happen. While the United States cruised along with 3% growth and higher in the late 1990s and mid-2000s, growth has not reached anywhere near that level since well before the recession. The best showing in the past decade was in 2015 when the annual rate of expansion hit 2.6%. So in other words, in order for Donald Trump's budget to be self-sustainable at all, we need to have a 3% growth, and it doesn't seem as if that's feasible or rational by the majority of economists on both the right and the left.
Well, right now, the Congressional Budget Office, their forecast over the next few years, 1.6%.
Okay.
Half of what we would need to cover the costs of this outrageous budget.
And I believe it would raise by 2036 $20 trillion to the deficit and $5 trillion within the next 10 years. So it doesn't seem to be making a lot of sense right now. It has passed the House, and a lot of people say by the time the bill gets to the Senate, it's going to be completely different. It's going to be completely strange, completely changed from what the budget is now. Very similar to what has happened with Donald Trump and the health care plan. It passed the House, and then in order for it to pass the Senate, it's going to have to be completely altered.
And that's my question. Maybe you can answer this for me, because it kind of seems like the House just rolls through whatever is put forth in front of them. They don't do any sort of debate. They don't really. It seems like they don't really care. They just put along whatever the party puts in front of them, and then the real work is done in the Senate. Is that how it's always been?
I don't recall there being such a difference between plans from the House to the Senate as in this administration.
Yeah.
And it does seem, like you just said, it does seem as if the House is just so desperate to be looking like a functioning body of government that they're willing to just pass anything through. Yeah. And honestly, it puts the senators,
not their problem anymore.
It's not their problem anymore, and it puts senators such as Senate Leader Mitch McConnell in a very precarious position, because at the end of the day, they're going to be the one shouldering and harboring the vast majority of the blame on a national level when these things actually do get passed, and when we see a massive increase in the deficit and a slow economic growth. The Senate will be the ones taking the majority of the blame. Yeah. So they're really in a precarious position here, with the House just sort of, dare I say, willy-nilly. I don't want to channel my own, my inner John Kasich, but with them sort of flippantly passing these bills. And I think they need to legitimize the Trump administration. They need to legitimize Donald Trump as a president. And I think they're doing their best to help him out in that regard, because, of course, as we were just talking about, this Russian scandal has been there since day one in order to discredit his presidency, and rightfully so, perhaps not rightfully so, depending on what side you're on. But this is sort of their way of attempting to normalize a Donald Trump administration.
Oh, it is rightfully so. I think it is absolutely rightfully so, because it just shows the lack of oversight, the lack of foresight when he was filling his cabinet full of people from the very beginning. It just shows incompetence again and again. And that's why the Republicans are passing things through the House, because they want to pat him on the head and show that he is not a complete and total failure.
We do have somebody like Noam Chomsky, though, however, who did come out and say he doesn't really care about the Russian scandal. You know, so I mean, it is.
Well, I ain't Noam Chomsky.
Thank God. He's so smart. I hear he wears glasses. No, he is a very smart guy. I don't know. I feel like we put these people on too many pedestals, quite frankly. He's just a human being who has some thoughts, political thoughts, and some are wrong and some are right. So let's just go in a little bit here of a rundown of the budget. The Department of Defense, they have $574 billion coming their way. It's the highest since 2016, and it is up 10%. Department of Homeland Security will have $44.1 billion coming their way, and that's the highest since 2016. I want to talk briefly about a man who is now being promoted. It is Sheriff David Clark. He is going to be appointed to a senior position in the Homeland Security Department. Now, he is a former, or I believe the current sheriff of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and there is no shortage of scandals when it comes to this man. There was an incident that happened in a jail in Milwaukee, and this happened to a man, Terrell Thomas. He was a 38-year-old inmate with bipolar disorder. He died in 2016 while awaiting trial in solitary confinement in a jail Sheriff Clark oversees. Evidently what happened was they cut off water for a week to this individual who was in solitary confinement for over a week. They shut off the water, and of course, you die. That's what happens to human beings when they lose water. David Clark, of course, he's all over Fox News on a regular basis. I'm not sure when the hell he sheriffs. And the individuals in Milwaukee certainly have no love lost for this man, and he is being promoted by the Trump administration, again, to a senior position in the Homeland Security Department. And I want to talk a little bit later in the show, perhaps after this, about Jeff Sessions and what they're doing, as I mentioned on this week's Dumpster Fire Chats, with arresting more illegal or undocumented individuals than ever, with 40,000 arrests. Already at this time in 2017. At this time in 2016, there was 31,000 arrests. And of course, Barack Obama was not lovingly coined deporter-in-chief. But what was the difference? He deported them. And what's happening now under Jeff Sessions with 12% of the private prisons, it's the GO Group and Core Civic. They are both in Jeff Sessions' portfolios. Of course, these are very diverse portfolios, and a lot of people are trying to make it seem as if it's not so nefarious, that he is obviously financially benefiting from having stake in these private prisons. But what is interesting is that they are deporting less and arresting more. The vast majority of undocumented people that live in this country go to the private prisons, which make up 19% of total prisoners across the country, although they are only 12% of the entire U.S. Prison systems. And so in my personal opinion, this is proof that they understand how to get free labor, how to get cheap labor, and you think individuals in the prison system who are American citizens, you think that they get treated poorly, and theoretically they live under the Constitution of the United States. Imagine when an undocumented, or in their words, illegal alien, imagine how they get treated. And of course, that's why there's the federal lawsuit from undocumented people suing the private prison industry for slave labor.
This makes me ill.
It absolutely should.
I mean, this is one of the, this is a truly nefarious, truly evil action. Jeff Sessions knows where his money comes from.
Absolutely.
He's in criminal justice. Of course he knows that he is invested in private prisons.
Yep.
Of course he knows.
Of course.
And his actions are directly that have actual direct consequences on how much money he makes. His government job has a direct correlation with how much money his investments make. This should be illegal. It's not illegal, and yet it is. It is not illegal. He's not doing anything objectively wrong.
We talk
here.
about the emoluments clause on a regular basis regarding the Trump administration, Donald Trump, and of course Jared Kushner and I believe it was $110 billion contract with the Saudis and those sorts of things. But Jeff Sessions is certainly it is legal, and you really do wonder if it should be.
And you wonder if this was the plan all along.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
of course.
I mean,
this is his whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, not just with him, but overall, all of this. I mean, they're choosing. This administration is choosing again and again to profit off the misery of others.
Absolutely.
You
can't deny it.
They are not doing anything, but except perhaps adding a few air conditioner jobs.
Yep.
They are not doing anything to make the lives of Americans better. What they're doing is they are marching us towards a capitalist dystopia where all of us are just workers that are making the people up top money. The gap is getting further and further. The gap is getting wider and wider. All of these big the defense
budget. We'll get into that.
Yeah. The defense budget is starting to get out of control. People are praising Trump for selling all these weapons to the Saudi Arabians. Is that what we want to be? Do we just want to be a war machine? Do we just want to build walls? Do we just want to build pipelines? Is that who we want to be as a people?
There is no denying the republic is quickly becoming an oligarchy, and that is where we have to participate in the local democratic process that happens in all of our towns and get these people out of office. Yeah. It can happen, and that's the only way that we're going to see any change. Speaking of which, Georgia, it is June 20th. That is their runoff election. Ossoff is running, and forgetting the name of the woman that he is running against. He is the Democrat. She's the Republican. He seems to be up by 7 points right now, but as we learned in 2016, don't trust the polls. You got to go to the polls in order to make sure that the person that you support actually achieves victory. And quickly, just back to the illegal or undocumented individuals, 11,000 of the 40,000 that have been arrested under the Sessions Justice Department are guilty of no crimes other than being here, and a lot of people who are very staunch anti-immigrant or undocumented immigrants would say just them being here is illegal. I told a story on the Dumpster Fire Chats about a woman who is married to a man who is a U.S. resident. She's got 3 children. She will be deported, and she's going to bring her 2-year-old with her. She's leaving an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, a girl and a boy. This woman was arrested and detained shopping at a supermarket. Did nothing wrong. And she will be forced to go back to Mexico. And as we talked about on the last episode, 23,000 people died in 2016 in Mexico because of their massive drug war. And the same numbers for Barack Obama, it was roughly 4,500 individuals that were undocumented individuals who were picked up who didn't have any violent crime or committed any crimes whatsoever. So that was 2016, and this is 2017. And you tell me those numbers in 2016, and I think those are atrocious. So you can imagine how atrocious I believe these new numbers to be.
It's not about protecting Americans. It's about making money. And don't fucking kid yourself if you think it's any different.
Billions and billions and billions of dollars and goods. And the sad thing is we're probably using a good that was made by a prisoner or a slave in many ways on a daily basis. And, we talked about it briefly on last podcast on the left today in South Carolina, for example. And there was, I think it was Dumpster Fire Chats, but before I listed a whole bunch of stuff. South Carolina had a contract with Victoria's Secret for a long time. So, I mean, it's just how bizarre them making lingerie that you give to your loved one on a Valentine's Day or a special holiday. So anyway, let's go back to the budget a little bit. Department of Veterans Affairs has $78.9 billion. That is up 5.9% under Donald Trump, and it's the highest since 1982. I personally don't have a problem with this.
This is good.
We have to reform the VA, and hopefully this money just isn't lost in the bureaucracy of every other government organization, and hopefully we can actually get these soldiers the mental health that they need, and really, assimilate them back into society and just treat them with the utmost respect, because they didn't cause the wars. They go and they fight on behalf of the individuals that do, and many of them are staunch anti-war activists as soon as they come back, and they're just human beings.
I would love
and heroes.
I would love if mental health became the forefront. I would love if mental health got a lot more funding in the Department of Veterans Affairs, but I don't hold out hope. This is not an administration that enjoys talking about mental health. This is not an administration that thinks that mental health is important in any way whatsoever.
Well, hopefully they can live up to the standards that they've said that they wanted to live up to regarding our veterans.
I hope so.
The EPA will see its lowest budget since 1982. That's $5.7 billion. Keep in mind, again, there are the Flint, Michigans all over the country that do not have clean drinking water. I don't know if this is the time to cut the EPA, although I do agree that there is a bureaucracy with the EPA that has funneled a lot of money to a lot of people and a lot of organizations and haven't done anything to actually curb pollution and things like that, because these crises have been going on for decades now. And so the EPA, I'm a bit conflicted on in some ways. On its face, I would love to, environmental protection, of course, but where is the money actually going? And now they're not going to do anything. They're going to lift a lot of the restrictions and things like that on greenhouse gases and industries, which is why Wall Street is absolutely thrilled with this budget, by the way. It went through the roof. Let's see. The Department of State and U.S. aid is $25.6 billion, the lowest since 2007. Department of Agriculture, $17.9 billion, lowest since 1982. And Marcus, you did a little research on this. This would be food stamps and things like that.
Yeah, the majority of the Department of Agriculture's budget is nutritional health assistance programs, which includes food stamps, SNAP, stuff like that.
Okay. And I'm sure Head Start would be in there. Some of the things that honestly just helped out every single foster brother and sister that I had growing up. A lot of these really crucial programs. You start cutting those, well, you know what? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're going to end up in jails. And the whole vicious cycle of the prison industrial complex continues. Yeah. Okay, Department of Labor is at $9.6 billion. That's the lowest since 1982. And Department of Justice is $16.2 billion, the lowest since 1994. Department of Health and Human Services is at the lowest since 2065.1 billion. Department of Commerce, lowest since 2011 with $7.8 billion. And Department of Education, oh, goodness, $59 billion, lowest since 2001, down 13% from Barack Obama. Department of Transportation, $16.2 billion, lowest since 2016. And Department of Housing and Urban Development, lowest since 2015 with $31.7 billion. So they are cutting a lot, but there is, and with the tax cuts and all these cuts, there is just not going to be enough money.
No.
And that's why everyone, every economist is completely befuddled by how this can be a conservative plan. There's nothing conservative about it whatsoever. They are spending like the liberal Democrats that the conservatives believe to be socialists.
10% up on Department of Defense. 10%. And to give you an idea, every percentage point of extra military spending costs you $6 billion. $6 billion per percentage point. Why do we need more military?
Right. Although
why do we need that?
Henry Zabrowski will be happy with NASA's budget. It's $19.1 billion. It's down 0.5. Never a straight answer. Henry doesn't like it one bit.
No, it's only down 0.8%.
Yeah.
So we're still that to me was the most surprising one. They're like, NASA, keep it the way it is.
Keep it a little bit.
I like space. I like shuttles. I like rockets.
You know he likes rockets and space and shuttles. So this budget
anything that looks like a big cock.
So the budget is confusing a lot of people. And again, it passed the House, but will it pass the Senate? I apologize that I just regaled you with so many boring numbers. But it is kind of fascinating to see what the Donald Trump presidency is looking like now, as someone who constantly, he was never tethered to low government spending. He was never tethered to any of the actual conservative economic roots that the Republican Party, Norquist, the Norquist,
Grover.
Grover Norquist. You know, he was never tethered to those ideas, and we're seeing it with this extremely bloated budget. And like Marcus just said, a 10% rise in the defense budget in military, we don't need it. We have so many military goods. And what happens is, well, as we've talked about previously on the show, the military doesn't even want half of this stuff. They are like, don't give us this budget. We don't need more tanks. We don't need more things. But those tanks aren't biodegradable. And they end up going into the streets of all of our small hometowns all across the country. That's why my hometown of Stevens Point has a frickin' tank, even though nothing has ever happened in this hometown that would warrant a tank. But that is the 1033 program that was put in place in the mid-90s that allowed local police precincts to purchase overstock military goods so the military can just sell brand new equipment to our local police precincts, and that's what's leading to this really dystopian world where the police are militarized, the residents are militarized. We have 280 million guns in this country, an average of 88%, 88 per 100 people, and I believe there's only 190 million gun owners, so the majority of people have more than one gun. So we have a militarized population, we have a militarized police, and that's what's leading to so much of this unrest that we're seeing all across our country.
Yeah, I mean, when you give the police military equipment, don't be surprised when they act like the military.
Of course they're going to act like the military without military training.
Yeah.
And isn't that horrible? There was a town, as a matter of fact, that I'm writing an article about. It's called Deadwood, South Dakota. This is where Calamity Jane and Wild Bill Hickok are buried.
Yeah, you don't know about Deadwood?
No.
You've never seen Deadwood?
No, I know this, Marcus, but this is what I'm going to tell you. It's 95% white, okay? It is. But
yeah.
there was very little violence and no murders in 2016, but felony drug arrests are up 130%, most of those being crystal methamphetamine and heroin, and it is because their police precincts are unbelievably aggressive. And 130, nothing has happened, and it's a town of, I think it was 1,000 people.
You've really never seen Deadwood.
It's
the HBO show.
I saw it, but I don't know. I watched it a little bit.
It's fantastic. It's a Shakespearean Western.
I love it. I don't have cable like that. Deadwood. And I heard they swore a lot.
Oh yeah.
Well, I don't know why they got to swear so much. Nonetheless, that's just a perfect example of what's happening with local police precincts all across the country. Felony drug arrests up 130%, despite the fact there is very little violence, no murders in 2016. But these police precincts are so militarized and so ready to go because Donald Trump, Jeff Sessions has emboldened them to do exactly that. Jeff Sessions also, it was February 21st of this year, he sent a memo out sort of reversing an Obama administration policy that allowed prosecutors not to seek the full mandatory sentences for drug arrests, for whatever the arrest might be. Basically gave freedom to the prosecutors to charge individuals how they felt they should be charged, that warranted, whatever charge they believe warranted the crime that the individual in their courtroom perpetrated. And now Jeff Sessions basically is strong-arming prosecutors all across the country to seek the mandatory minimum sentence for any one of these arrests. And so we're seeing towns like Deadwood, which is a totally peaceful place, and because of crystal methamphetamine and opioids, which is, of course, caused by a huge influx of OxyContin, large pharmaceutical drugs that a lot of these people get hooked on.
Fentanyl.
And can no longer afford, as we saw in Indiana, that had to do a needle share program because because HIV was so prominent. It's just a multi-pronged situation, getting more people behind bars in order for the system, the prison industrial complex, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions and the individuals like him to benefit and profit. And it's not the country that I believe it should be.
Never forget that for all of these tough on crime policies, all of these mandatory minimum policies that Jeff Sessions puts into place, he profits from them personally. He gets a bigger house. He gets another car. He is doing this not because he wants to protect Americans, not because he wants to make this place safer. All he cares about is lining his pockets and lining the pockets of the people who pay him.
Absolutely. And the majority of Americans don't agree with it. This is a survey from the Justice Action Network. And this was a little survey they did in Florida, North Carolina, Nevada, Kentucky, Missouri, and Wisconsin. I'll just read a couple of them. Our federal prisons house too many nonviolent criminals. Almost 70% of Floridians agree. 66% North Carolina, 64%, 62%, an average of like 60. The majority of Americans, roughly 65, roughly 70% of Americans agree the federal government is spending too much tax money keeping nonviolent offenders behind bars, and roughly 75% of Americans agree that the main goal of our criminal justice system should be rehabilitating criminals to become productive, law-abiding citizens, and roughly 60% or 63% believe the federal government should remove barriers that make it more difficult for released prisoners to find jobs. So the American people want prison reform. So why isn't it happening? Because the people in charge are benefiting from it. The exact complex that they created. So Well, I guess that's kind of fun. All right, that's this week. We get all worked up. Now I'm sweating. You know, if I start sweating too much, this is not good.
I know.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. I think that's basic. I'm sure we've missed some of the news stories that you've been following this week, but there's a lot of stuff out there.
We just can't get to everything, man.
One of these days we'll be able to do a more regular show, but at this point, maybe when we're in our 50s, we'll call it our retirement when we just have to do one show a day.
It's like our retirement is getting angrier.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait. Oh, I'm gonna be so happy.
Anger keeps you alive. We all know that.
Well, certainly my grandmother will never die. My American grandmother. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening, and be sure to buy some products if you want to. I like my products. Products. We got some T-shirts out there, so check those out. Also, the BK for BK campaign is going great. We got our T-shirts in, some buttons, and some stickers, so that's going along absolutely wonderfully. I'm learning so much, and thank you for all supporting that. That's bkforbk.com. And let's see, Marcus, anything else?
I think that's about it, man. Just be sure to go to cavecomedyradio.com and listen to all the rest of our shows.
That's right, and find Marcus on Twitter at Marcus Parks. Instagram the same. Instagram, I am Ben Kissel 1, and on Twitter, I am at Ben Kissel. All right, everyone, we'll talk to you soon.
For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to cavecomedyradio.com.